busy time. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to start sponsors and then we'll run right into the Gemara, okay? And hopefully the other guys will pick up shortly. A year of learning, Suanan Geralik in memory of Malka Pearl Man and Philip Man. And Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch. Yosef Meir ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Henya Rivka Perel Rosner, Bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch. And in memory of family murdered in the Holocaust, Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shel Shur, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Arav Akiva, Marcia Fetterbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Fetterbush, Uriel Pinchas ben Arav Shimon, Sharon and Fred Liska, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman Edelbas Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Siddell, and Irving and Pearl Kaplan, friends of Avi Gitler, Avrameir ben Shimon, and Martha Gitler, China Bas Yeshaya, friends of Toby Peres, Saratova Bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka Bat Yosef, friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim, many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi. A month of learning by Mindel and Dave Cheslow in memory of her mother, Shosha Bat Bear, by Carol and Josh Sanborn, in memory of her mother, Yita Bat Nachman Ben Yamin, by Mel and Haran Haller, in memory of his brother, Yaakov Ben Avraham. Have a month of learnings by Stephanie and Fred Mortman for the Refuah Shlema of her daughter, Mazal Bat Sarah Malka. A week of learning by Judy Iger, in memory of her father, Eliyahu Ben Yosef Mordechai. Also today, a day of learning by Sharon Sittner, in memory of her mother, Yudis Bas Aryeh Leib, by Natalie Goldstein, in memory of her father, Reuven Ben Raphael. May the Neshamas have an aliyah, Kranker of Hia, Ra'el, the Yeshira Shem Wataliah, and the Chol B'nai Yisrael, a good Geben Shtiyach.
Amen.
Amen.
Welcome, Bob. Okay, we are on
Good morning.
57A, a few lines down, okay? Remember, we had started this Amud because there was this discussion between the Tzduki and Rabbi Hanina on the bottom of the previous Amud as to whether the Shekhinah still was in the midst of Bnei Yisrael. Okay? And then they tried to learn it based on a procedural issue. A question was asked as a hekesh, okay, that the fact that you did the same kind of sprinkling inside the Kodshe Kadoshim versus inside the Heichal towards the Parochet. Okay, and not only did you have to do both, one for a par and one for the aisle, right? I believe, right? But then also the same number. And so the question was asked, is this a double hekesh? And is that appropriate procedure? Okay. That's where we sort of left off. So the Gemara now was addressing that issue. Okay? What, as I said, I call the procedural issue regarding the how to darshan a situation. So, amar lo have hekesh. According to the one who said there were not, I'm going to call it a double hekesh in this situation, it's not a problem. It works out well for them. Ela laman amar have hekesh. But according to the one who said it was a hekesh, namely you had one hekesh to show it was from inside Kodshe Kadoshim then to the Heichal, and then another one to show that it was one above and the others below. Okay, what about that? My ikalamema. What are you going to say? So the Gemara gives the first answer, Mikomotu degamre mehadade, namely that actually, when it talked about the locations, right, they could be derived from one another. Okay, namely that the halacha of the blood of the bull could be derived from that of the goat, and not, okay, the inside or the outside of the curtain or the number of sprinklings and things like that. Okay? So that's one answer. So that you really didn't have two examples of Hekesh. You really only had one. Now, Gemara suggests we can give an alternative answer. Ibayat Ema. If you want, I could say the follows. Chutz mi bifnim bechade zimna gamar. Okay? Namely, that when we talk about the sprinkling in the Hechal, okay, that could have been derived from the example of the sprinkling inside. Namely, I'm going to phrase it now differently. If you want, we could say the example of the sprinkling in the Hechal was all one occasion learned together. Okay, so it was just a single Hekesh that included my explanation, both the location and the methodology of sprinkling. Okay, all in one learning. Okay, and that was also a possible answer. Fine, let's go on. The Gemara says, in a sense, when we're talking now a new piece. Tana, one of the Tanaim taught the Braita, Keshehu mazeh, eino mazeh al haparochet, ele keneged haparochet. That when he sprinkles the blood, he doesn't sprinkle it actually on the curtain, okay? But we could translate keneged as opposite. I'd be interested to hear if Art Scroll has a different translation. Anybody? Art Scroll? Does it give a different wording? Okay. Opposed to. Okay. In front of, even. Okay. The curtain. Amar Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi. Now, Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Yossi, is important because he was an important transition generation Tana. He was one of the last of the Tanaim and into the generation of the Amoraim, but he is particularly important because when there was a decree against the Jewish people, he and others traveled to Rome to appeal to the emperor. And while in Rome, he got to see the material that the Romans had captured and taken from the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so that's why he's cited here. Okay, and he tells us, Ani re'itiha beromi. I saw it, namely the parochet in Rome. V'hayu aleha kama tipei damim shel par v'sa'ir shel yom haKippurim. And he's testifying that he was an eyewitness to seeing drops of blood of goat and of bull on the parochet, recognizing it as having been done on Yom Kippur.
How would he know it was done on Yom Kippur?
I was waiting for somebody to ask the question. Excellent. Okay, that is going to be now what the Gemara has to deal with. Okay, How would he know by looking at the drops of blood that that was the case? Okay.
So how does he know?
There
How
were,
does he know which blood is from the par and which is from the saya?
the Gemara is going to present to us that issue. There are other occasions when blood from a goat or from a bull could have been sprinkled. Fine. That may be because it wasn't a only one day a year occasion. It's understandable that there could be drops of blood there. But dafka, how would he know?
From idolatry.
Right? Exactly. Steve was saying to us that in one case it could have been a situation of idolatry. In another case, it could be another situation. Okay? Of the Kohen making, or the Sanhedrin making a mistake in halacha. But how do you know dafka it's Yom Kippur? Let's continue now. So thanks for being my partner there. All right, Bob? Okay, so the Gemara wants to pick up and tell us the following. V'dilma depar ha'elem davar shel tzibor u'seirei avodah zarah havu. Perhaps those drops of blood were from another occasion, not necessarily from a bull and goat from Yom Kippur, but namely from the situation of davar ha'elem, right? Ha'elem davar tzibur, namely a communal sin, okay? Or perhaps it was from a situation of communal acting, avodah zarah. Those situations. Gemara now goes on. Dechaza da'avide kisidran, that he saw they were done in a certain pattern. Okay? They were performed in a certain order. Utnan nami gabi parha elem davar shel tzibur ki hai gavna. But the Gemara challenges that and says, but in regards to that other occasion, namely a communal error, okay, or communal sin or idolatry, isn't it also such that blood was sprinkled and it didn't necessarily touch the curtain? And if it did, it may have been touched there on the outside. Keshehu mazeh lo hayu nog'im b'parochet v'im nag'o nag'o. That normally, when it was sprinkled on those occasions, it wouldn't touch the curtain. And if it happened to touch, it happened to touch. However, again, right? Rabbi Eliezer b'Rebbe Yossi responds. Amar Rabbi Eliezer b'Rebbe Yossi, Ani re'itiha b'Romi. I saw drops of blood on the curtain there in Rome. Vahayu aleha kama tipei damim shapar he'elam davar shel tzibur u'seirei avodah zarah. And I also saw that there were drops of blood, okay, on the parochet, not from Yom Kippur, but it must have been clearly from the occasion of a unwitting communal sin or idol worship. So the Gemara says, "V'dilma depar v'sa'ir shel Yom Kippurim ninhu." Well, perhaps again, what you saw were Yom Kippur drops, I'll use it that way, of blood, and not from communal sin or idolatry. Dechazanhu da'avidei shelo kesidran, that you saw that they were not done in a particular order or a particular form. What happens, says the Gemara? Okay, the answer is that it must have been possible for him to see that they were in the order of 1 above and 7 below versus drops that were just, I'm going to use the word helter-skelter for a moment. Okay. Now the Gemara raises a point. Nitarvulo damim bedamim. Let's say that the possibility could have occurred, okay, that the blood of the goat and the blood of the bull, and remember the bull was supposed to go first. Okay, let's say that blood got mixed together. What about that situation? Amar Rava, says Rava, notein echat lamala v'sheva lamata. Okay, he would sprinkle one above and 7 below. V'olelo lakan ulakan. And Rava then says, okay, that would apply. Okay, the one above and 7 below would count to both the bull and the goat. That was Rava's explanation if it got mixed. Now, Amaruha Kame de Rabbi Yirmiyah. They mentioned Rava's answer to Rav Yirmiyah. Rav Yirmiyah's response was the following. Amar, Bavlai Tipshai, these foolish Babylonians, Mishum de Daire Ba'ara de Chashucha, Amre Shema'ata de Mashchad, because they live in a cloudy, darkened land, they speak cloudy, unclear lessons. Ha ka yahev lamala de sa'ir, makame mata de pa. How is it possible, he says, that they could put above the blood from the goat, and then when beforehand they're supposed to put the blood of the bull? Vahatorah amra. And the Torah specifically says, V'chila mechaper et hakodesh. And with it all, when he's finished, it then brings atonement on the sacred place. Kila dam hapar, which implies he must be finished with the blood of the bull, v'achar kach kila dam hasair, and then afterwards finish with the blood of the goat. El Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. But Rabbi Yirmiyah says this was the situation that the Kohen Gadol had to follow. Noten kat lamala v'sheva lamata l'shem hapar. That he would sprinkle 1 above and 7 below with the blood of the bull. V'chozer v'noten echat lamala v'sheva lamata l'shem hasair. That then he goes back and he sprinkles 1 above and 7 below with the blood of the goat. That would be the proper, let's say, procedure. However, Rabbi Yirmiyah is continuing. Nitarvulo damim bedamim. But if there became a situation where the blood of the two got mixed, b'matanot ha'achronot, perhaps in the later presentations, applications, Savar Rav Papa, Kame de Rava Lamema. Rav Papa thought to answer to Rava in front of him the following. Notain Sheva Lamata L'Shem Par, U'L'Shem Sa'ir. That he would make 7 below for the sake with the blood of the goat. With the blood of the bull and then the blood of the goat. V'chozer v'notein echat lamala l'shem sa'ir. And then goes back and does 1 above for the goat. Amar le Rava. Rava disagrees with him and tells him as follows. Ad hashta karulan tipshai. Up to this point, the sages in Israel considered us foolish. Vahashta tipshai de tipshai. With that kind of an answer, had Rav Papa really presented it they would have called us the foolish of the fools. The kam magmarinan loho velo gamiri. Okay. Because they could say, we teach them what's appropriate, and yet they don't learn it. Vahaka yahiv mata de sa'ir, mekame mala de sa'ir. And here you're saying that they would give below with the goat before doing above with the goat. Vahatorah amra, and the Torah, I'm going to say, clearly states, teim lamala va'achar kach lamata, that you apply it above first and afterwards below. Right? So what happens as we go on? The next Amud, Ela Amar Rava, but rather Rava says this is what has to be done. Notain Sheva Lamata L'Shem Par, that he applies 7, right, times for the bull. V'chozer v'notain echat lamala, and then he goes back and he does 1 above. V'sheva lamata, and then 7 below. L'shem sa'ir, for the purpose of the goat. Nitarvulo kosot v'kosot, and if the blood got mixed up from one container, one cup to another, what does he do? Notain, he applies, v'chozer, and then he goes back, v'notain, and applies again. In other words, he makes his second application. V'chozer v'notain shlosha pa'amim. And then he has to go back a 3rd time and then make a 3rd application. Okay. So what happens then is that, in essence, as the Gemara is going to tell us, okay, ultimately, okay, we see the following, right? He has 3 applications. If he did the goat first, okay, and then the bull, and then the goat again, we could argue at that point he didn't do it in the right order. But in essence, what we could also say is, okay, the first one doesn't apply. And so it's only valid because of the 2nd and the 3rd applications, those sets. And that would still fulfill the requirement as described appropriately by doing the bull and then doing the goat. Okay? Now, the Gemara goes on. Miktsat damim nitarvulo. Let's say that only part of the blood got mixed up. Umiktsat damim lo nitarvulo. And part of the blood did not get mixed up. Okay? We could take an example that maybe some of the blood spilled. Okay? Pshita, it's obvious. Ki yahev. Mevadaim yahev, that it's obvious that when he times time to apply it, he should only apply it from the appropriate, correct, valid blood and use that, the one that he can clearly identify. Yehu, says the Gemara, nevertheless, Hanach Shirayim Havula. Vilisod Azle. But if that's the case, and you have some blood left over, isn't that blood considered shirayim, leftover blood? And one is expected to pour that at the base of the Mizbeach. O Dilma, Dichuyin Havu, Va'azle La'ama, or perhaps we might argue maybe that blood is not really considered that kind of remainder, okay? But instead, it's because it was a mixture blood, it's put aside, it's rejected. And when we reject something, we say it cannot be used, whatever. And as a result, if it cannot be used forever, it gets simply poured and dumped into the, what I'll call for the moment, the canal, right? That goes through them by the Mizbeach, and it goes out into the Kidron River. Okay? Now, Amar Rav Papa. Says Rav Papa, Afilu Laman da Amar, Kos Echad Oseh Chavero Shirayim. Let's assume, says Rav Papa for the moment, that they didn't have large bowls. They had smaller containers, a cup. And he needed to, when he was catching the blood, needed a multiple number of cups to do so. Okay? So what happens then? Okay? Maybe all we need to do the sprinkling is 1 cup. And we've got 1, 2, who knows how many, especially from a bowl, other cups we have left over. What's the status then? Okay? Do I use up the most of the blood from 1 cup and have the blood in the other cups considered shirayim, and all of those get poured out to the base of the Mizbeach? Or do I do something else? Maybe I should take, for the sprinkling, blood from each of the cups. So now we can continue. All right? So now, coming back, Amar Rav Papa.
Really? No?
All right? Says Rav Papa, even if we were to say, okay, that 1 cup, all right, renders all the others remainders. Say he collected it in 2 cups, right? Hani mili hecha de ibai lemetav matzah yehav. Okay, this applies that when it comes time to do the applications of the blood, right? Question is if he needs that to apply that blood. Aval hai the ibai lemetav lo matzah yehav lo. But if he comes a situation where he does not need to present the blood from the 2nd or even the 3rd or whatever cup, okay, then, okay, what's the status then? Do we say that it's rejected? Amar le Rav Huna, Berei de Rav Yoshua le Rav Papa. Okay? Ad Rabba. Hold on, Rav Papa, just the opposite. Afilu laman da Amar kos echad oseh chavero dachui. Even if we're going to say that he collected, let's say, the blood of the bull in 2 cups, and all he needed for the application was 1 cup, right? Does that mean that the other cup is really rejected? Okay. That's only a case, hani mili de dechaye biyadayim. That's only a case where, in other words, where he clearly rejected it with his hands. In other words, purposely. Aval hecha de lo dechaye biyadayim lo. Okay. But rather, if he did not reject it purposely, okay, that blood is not considered rejected. The Tanya, as taught elsewhere in a Braita, Lemala hu omer ve'et damo yishpoch. Okay, it says in a Braita when he would sprinkle it above, right? Then, okay, what would be left over would be poured out on the bottom of the altar, right? And it says there, when he takes it with his fingers, right? What does he say? Citing that pasuk. Ulamata hu omer v'et kol dama yishpoch. And then when he sprinkles from the bottom, okay, he's also keeping in mind and citing the second pasuk. And all the blood would be sprinkled. So notice we have a difference between the first part of the pasuk, ve'et damo yishpoch, and he will sprinkle its or his blood, versus the second part of the pasuk, okay, another pasuk that says all the blood would be poured. Okay, so what is the Braita then telling us? Minayim lechata'at shekibel dama ba'arba kosot. So now the Gemara goes on and says, hold on a second. Let's say that he has a situation where he's collected the blood primarily from a chatas, right, a sin offering, and he collected it in 4 cups. V'natan mizeh echat u'mizeh echat shekulan nishpachim liyasod. Okay, so he took some from 1 cup for the sprinkling, right, and 1 from another cup, right, and the rest, it would seem, be remainers, right, and those remainders should be poured out to the base of the mizbeach. Talmud Loma, vet kol dama yishpoch. Why? Because the pasuk says, excuse me, and he shall pour out all its blood. Yachol afilu natan arba matanot me'achad mehen. It's possible, one might think, that maybe he could do all of the sprinklings, all the presentations of the blood, all from 1 cup, right? Talmud Loma, therefore the text is telling us, ve'et damo yishpoch, that he shall pour out the blood. Hahu nishpach liyasod. Okay, it means that the blood that was remaining, okay, in that bowl would be poured out on the altar. Vahen nishpachim la'ama, and the blood that was remaining in the other cups, they would be poured into the canal. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Omer, and he says, Minayim lechatat shekibel dama ba'arba kosot. On what basis do you say that they would receive the blood of a chatas in 4 cups? V'natan arba matanot me'echad mehen, and apply the 4 applications from only 1 of them. Shekulan nishpachim liyasod, that all of them are poured out then, the remainder, on the base of the altar. Talmud Loma, vet kol dama yishpoch. But the verse says clearly, right, and he shall pour out all the blood. Ula Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. And according to the view of Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon, Haktiv, isn't it written, ve'et damo yishpoch, and he shall pour out its blood, right? Implying then, what? That it must mean that there's a difference in the verses, clearly. Amar Rav Ashi, lema'ute shirayim shebetzavar behema, says Rav Ashi. Then when it says you pour out its blood, we're talking clearly about the blood that emanates, okay, the dam hanefesh, we called it, remember? That blood that exudes, for the most part, right after the shechita, okay? That's what we're talking about. And that exudes from the throat of the animal. Okay? And the rest would be considered remainder blood. Okay. Now that seemed to somewhat clarify that situation. Okay? So the Gemara goes on and now continues. What did our Mishnah tell us? Eira dam hapar l'toch dam hasa'ir, right? That he poured the blood of the bull into the blood of the goat. Okay. Now remember, he's done one application of the blood of the bull. He comes back and does another application of the blood of the goat. Now he's mixing them, and he's going to do a third application of the blood. Okay? So what happens with this? Right? Tznan. It was taught in another Mishnah. Kiman da'amar ma'arvin likranot. This is similar to a Mishnah that tells us about one who said that the Kohen Gadol mixes the two types of blood and he puts them on the kranot, on the corners of the inner altar, the mizbeach, right inside the hechal. The itmar, as it was said, Rabbi Yoshia v'Rabbi Yonatan. Okay, in a discussion between Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonatan. Okay, again, by the way, Rabbi Yoshia was a transgenerational Tana, end of the Tanaim, beginning of the Amoraim. Okay, he had come from Bavel, went to study in Eretz Yisrael, and then went back, primarily, by the way, a student of Rabbi Yishmael. And his bar plugta in Eretz Yisrael was Rabbi Yonatan. Okay, just to clarify. So again, it's the end of the Tanaic period, beginning of the Amoraim. So what happens? Chad amar ma'arvin, v'chad amar en ma'arvin. One said that they mixed the blood. One said they did not mix the blood. Okay? Now, what happens? Okay, this is the issue, right? What point did he mix? At what point doesn't he mix? Does he mix the Kohen Gadol before he applies it to the inner altar or not? Right? That seems to be the question. So the Gemara says as follows: Tistayim de Rabbi Yoshia, hu de Amar Ma'arvin. We can conclude that it's Rabbi Yoshia who said that he does mix the blood. De Amar, because he said, Af al gav de lo kativ yachdav, even though the pasuk does not include the word, together, kiman dechtiv yachdav. It's as if, it's considered as if the word together is included in the pasuk. Okay? Why? Because the pasuk says, and he shall take the blood of the bull and the blood of the goat. And so he determined that the two sets of blood were mixed together. So the Gemara wants to then tell us, Afilu tema Rabbi Yonatan. You might even say that Rabbi Yonatan also could hold and say that, Mishnah. Sha'anei hacha dichtiv achat. Why? Because in the pasuk, it's also written the word once in another pasuk. Okay? That they need to be sprinkled not as two separate items, but as one. Now the Gemara then says as follows: Tanya de lo kashinuyim. The bright, it seems, was not taught according to how we would answer it. Why? Because we have the pasuk that says, "V'lakach midam hapar umidam hasa'ir." We take, right, from the blood of the bull and of the blood of the goat. Right? And then, by the way, the pasuk goes on to tell us, and put it on the corners of the altar round about it. Sheyihiyu me'uravim divrei Rabbi Yoshia. That implies that they must be mixed according to the view of Rabbi Yoshia. Right? So I'll continue just a little bit.
But if that's the case, how could he be seen the separate blood on the parochet in Rome?
Okay, because remember, this blood we're talking about is not sprinkled. That's already been done. Okay, separate blood of goat, separate blood of bull on the parochet. Now we're talking, that's why I said it's a third application of blood. This one is on the altar, the incense altar inside the heichal.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay, so now we're saying that blood gets mixed, right? So the Gemara picks up, and the reason, as I say, I'm moving a little bit because we still have to keep in mind time change on Thursday and Friday. Rabbi Yonatan Amir. What does Rabbi Yonatan say? Mizeh b'fnei atzmo, u'mizeh b'fnei atzmo. He argues, he says, no. He says, you present from this one, in other words, blood from the bull by itself, and you present the one from the goat by itself. Amar lo Rabbi Yoshia, v'lo kvar ne'amar achat. But already we have a pasuk that says, right, that it should be done once. Now, it's interesting to note that that pasuk that Rabbi Yoshia seems to be referring to is a pasuk that says, and Aaron makes atonement upon the corners once a year with the blood of the sin offering of atonement. Okay? Now, we could argue and raise the question, which maybe Rabbi Yonatan might do, that has nothing to do with the mixing of the blood. That may have something to do simply with when he does it. Amar lo Rabbi Yonatan, v'halo kvar ne'amar midam hapar u'midam hasa'ir. But wasn't it already said elsewhere in a pasuk, the blood of the goat, the blood of the bull, and the blood of the goat? Im kain lama ne'amar achat. If that's the case, why in that pasuk did they say once? Lomar lecha echat v'lo shtayim midam hapar. To tell us that it was from one, okay, and not two sets of sprinkling from the bull. Echat v'lo shtayim midam hasa'ir. And one and not two sets of sprinkling of presentation from the blood of the goat. Okay? So in other words, it tells us again that they two of them disagree. Okay? And we're going to stop right there, okay? Because we're going to then get into a new Breita, and that new Breita then is going to try simply to give a solution, okay, to this argument, and then the Gemara is going to go on to a new topic, okay? So we'll just, as I say, stop at this point. We'll get to the solution, finish that off first thing tomorrow, and then go on to a number of other aspects of the dealing with the blood before we get to a whole new Mishnah, okay, that talks about what happens when the Kohen Gadol exits, okay, in that case. All right? Okay, everybody stay with, so let's before we sign off, Thursday and Friday, because it's Rosh Chodesh, a longer davening, should we